The sound of my own drawer being forced open was more painful than any physical blow, but their words were the poison that paralyzed me behind the bathroom door. I am Eleanor. I am 71 years old, and I spent my life selling tools and construction materials. I know how to recognize when a structure is about to collapse, and my family had just crumbled. What my son Marcus and his wife did not know is that the foundations of this house and my fortune hold secrets that only the architect knows. The bathroom was permeated with the scent of lavender from my usual soap, an aroma that until a few minutes ago transmitted peace and cleanliness to me. Now the air felt heavy, charged with an invisible toxicity that filtered through the crack of the wooden door. I stood there in front of the mirror, my dark hands still damp, observing my own reflection. The wrinkles on my face tell the story of a black woman who carried bags of concrete when her husband got sick. A woman who was not afraid to negotiate with rough suppliers or fire dishonest employees. But nothing, absolutely nothing, in my years leading Garrick Hardware had prepared me for the backstabbing that was happening 10 feet away from me in my own bedroom. Look carefully, Marcus. The old lady must have them here among this junk of old papers, whispered Chloe. Her voice had that impatient and shrill tone she always tried to hide at Sunday dinners with a fake sweetness. I don't know, Chloe. I feel bad doing this. What if she comes in? Answered my son. My Marcus, the boy whose scraped knees I healed, whose business administration degree I paid for. The man who was now trembling, not out of respect for his mother, but out of fear of being discovered. Oh please Marcus, don't be a coward. She is in the bathroom. She takes hours fixing herself up. You know how she is with her creams and her vanities. Besides, we need to secure this. When she dies, this is ours. But if we don't have the papers at hand, your sisters are going to want to stick their noses in. We have to be ready to sell as soon as it happens. As soon as it happens. That is what they called my death. A transaction. An event on the calendar like paying taxes or renewing a license. I felt an intense cold rising from my heels to the back of my neck. It was not sadness, at least not yet. It was a mixture of disbelief and a silent white-hot fury, similar to the calm that precedes a controlled demolition. I leaned my hand on the cold marble sink so as not to fall. My mind, trained for inventories and balance sheets, began to process the information at a dizzying speed. Marcus and Chloe had been insisting for months that I move to a room on the ground floor, they said. They talked about the house being too big for me alone, that the maintenance was expensive. I always refused. This house with its hardwood floors that creak, and its high windows, I built it myself. Every brick was paid for with the profits from the screws, the nuts, the saws, and the hammers I sold for 40 years. I heard the unmistakable sound of the third drawer of my dresser, the one with the tricky lock. If you do not push it up before pulling, it gets stuck. Damn it. This piece of furniture is trash, Chloe complained. Let me do it, said Marcus. And then the dry sound of the wood giving way. Here is a blue folder. Let's see. There was a pause, a silence of paper being leafed through with greed. No, these are just medical bills and electric receipts. Where the hell does this woman keep the deed? She is suspicious to the bone. I told you maybe she keeps them at the bank, suggested Marcus. No. She doesn't trust banks for important papers since the crash in 2008. They have to be here. Look under the mattress if necessary. That old woman is from the old school. She surely has everything hidden like a squirrel. That old woman? The phrase echoed in my ears. Not my mother, not Mrs. Garrick, not even your mom. I was the old woman. The obstacle, the piece of furniture that breathes and occupies the space they had already divided up in their imagination. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. I smoothed my beige silk blouse, adjusted my gray hair, which I wore in an impeccable bun, and took a deep breath. I was not going to come out crying. I was not going to come out screaming like a crazy woman. That is what a victim would do. And Eleanor, the owner of the biggest hardware store in the district, was never a victim. I opened the bathroom door. The mechanism turned without making a noise, thanks to the oil I put on the hinges myself every 6 months. I walked out with a firm step, the same step with which I walked the aisles of my business, supervising the loaders. The scene I found was pathetic and revealing. Marcus was kneeling in front of my oak dresser with his hands in my folded underwear. Chloe was standing by the window holding my musical jewelry box, the one my late husband gave me 30 years ago, checking the false bottom. They froze. It was almost comical, as if someone had pressed the pause button on a bad movie. Marcus turned pale, the color of quicklime. Chloe, with more cynicism, let the lid of the jewelry box fall, emitting a sharp thud, and tried to compose a smile, although her eyes gave her away. They were the eyes of an animal caught in the headlights of a truck. I stood in the doorway upright. I said nothing for 5 long seconds. I let the silence weigh on them, crush them, make them feel small under my gaze. Then I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was that crooked smile I used when a supplier tried to sell me second-rate material at a premium price. Looking for something? I asked. My voice came out calm, without tremors, with a softness that cut more than an electric saw. Marcus stood up clumsily, almost tripping over his own feet. "Mama, he stammered, looking for a lie that could save him. "We were looking for," Chloe intervened with that viper-like speed that characterizes her. "Some aspirin. Marcus had a terrible headache, and we didn't want to bother you by knocking on the door if you were busy. We thought maybe you would have a first aid kit here." I looked at the open drawer where I keep my personal documents. I looked at my rummaged underwear. I looked at the displaced jewelry box. "Aspirin in my underwear drawer?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. My Marcus, I didn't know a headache was cured by checking my drawers." Marcus lowered his head, unable to hold my gaze. Chloe, however, tried to keep up the charade. She smoothed her dress and adopted a defensive posture. "Well, Eleanor, one never knows where elderly people keep things. Sometimes they get confused and put things in strange places. We just wanted to help." "Of course," I said, walking slowly toward my bed and sitting on the edge, crossing my legs with elegance. "We elderly people get confused a lot. We forget where we put pills. We forget to close drawers. But look, Chloe, there are things we don't forget. We don't forget who paid the down payment on your condo when you got married. We don't forget who loaned you the money for the new car last year." The atmosphere became even more tense. Chloe pressed her lips together. "You don't have to get like that, Eleanor. It was just a misunderstanding. We're leaving so you can rest. It's clear you need tranquility." "Yes, that is what I need," I responded, staring at them. "Tranquility and order. You know I am a woman of order. In the hardware store, if a screw isn't in its box, the whole inventory fails. In the family, it is the same." Marcus took a step toward me with his hand extended, trying to touch my shoulder. "Mama, really forgive me if it seemed like something else. We love you very much. We just worry about you." I pulled away subtly, avoiding his touch. That gesture hurt me more than the betrayal itself, the physical rejection of my own son. But in that moment, his hand seemed dirty to me, contaminated by greed. "I know, son. You worry so much that you are already planning what to do with my things when it happens." The color left Chloe's face completely. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I had heard them. There was no way to deny it. "No, Mama, not that." "You heard wrong," he tried to say. "Get out," I ordered. I did not shout. It was an imperative whisper. "Get out of my room right now." Chloe grabbed Marcus by the arm and pulled him toward the exit. "Let's go, Marcus. Your mother is upset. Tomorrow we'll talk when her tantrum passes." They left and closed the door. I heard their hurried steps going down the wooden staircase and then the slam of the front door. Only then, when silence took over the house again, did I allow myself to release the air I had been holding. My hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from pure hard adrenaline. I got up and went to the drawer they had violated. I arranged my clothes delicately. Then I put my hand all the way to the back, feeling for the false bottom my father, a carpenter by trade, had built into this furniture 50 years ago. I pressed the hidden spring and the wood shifted. There was the black leather folder, the deed to the house, the property titles of the commercial lots, the shares of the hardware store, and most importantly, my current will. I took it out and put it on the bed. My dark fingers traced the worn leather. All of this represented my life, my sweat, my early mornings loading trucks, and they saw it as loot, as a right acquired by the simple fact of sharing my blood. I felt stupid. For years I had ignored the signs. Chloe's subtle questions about how much the square footage was worth in this area. Marcus' constant complaints about his salary, waiting for me to take out the checkbook. I thought they were normal problems of modern life, that the economy was tough, but no, it was parasitism. I was the host, and they were waiting for the host to die to devour the remains. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. The roses I planted last year were blooming, oblivious to the human misery occurring inside the house. When she dies, this is ours. The phrase kept repeating in my head like a broken record. Well, guess what? No, I said aloud to the empty room. Guess what? I'm not going to die just yet. And guess what? This is not going to be yours. The initial sadness was transforming into something much more useful. Strategy in business. When you discover a partner is stealing from you, you don't start crying in the office. You close the accounts, change the locks, and call the lawyers. And Marcus and Chloe had just broken the most sacred social contract that exists, that of family. I looked at the wall clock. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I still had time. I went to my desk, that old walnut piece from where I directed my tool empire for decades. I took out my agenda, that black notebook where I write everything down with a fountain pen because I never trusted cell phones for important things. I looked for a number, not my lawyers. That would come later. I looked for the number of Speedy Moving and Transport. The owner, Big Mike, owed me several favors from when I let him have parts for his trucks on credit during hard times. I dialed the number on the landline. Hello, Garrick Hardware, answered a husky voice on the other end. No, Mike, it's Eleanor. Eleanor, the boss. Mrs. Garrick, what a miracle. How can I serve you? Do you need materials? No, Mike. I need a truck, the biggest one you have, and I need it tomorrow first thing at 7 in the morning sharp. Geez, Mrs. Garrick, tomorrow is Sunday. But for you, anything. Are you moving? Are you selling old furniture? I smiled again, this time with cold determination. I looked around. I looked at the velvet curtains, the oil paintings, the crystal lamps, everything Chloe had already imagined selling or remodeling. Let's say I'm going to do a deep cleaning, Mike. A total cleaning. I want you to bring 4 strong boys. We are going to move a lot of things. And bring boxes. Lots of boxes. Understood, boss. We'll be there. I hung up the phone, sat in the swivel chair, and looked at the black leather folder on the bed. My mind began to trace the plan. It was not going to be a simple tantrum. It was not going to be a shouting match. It was going to be a masterclass, a lesson in logistics and power. They thought I was a vulnerable old woman clinging to her memories. They were about to discover that I am Eleanor Garrick, the woman who knows exactly how much every ounce of what she owns weighs and how to move it. That night I did not sleep. I spent the hours walking through the house, touching the walls, saying goodbye to the naivety with which I had lived the last few years. I took out suitcases. I started packing not just clothes but what really mattered, my dignity and my control. When the sun began to rise, painting the sky a soft orange, I was already dressed in my gray suit, the one I used for meetings with the bank, and my comfortable shoes. I made myself a strong coffee, black and without sugar. At 7 sharp, the roar of a diesel engine broke the stillness of the residential morning. I peeked out the window. There was the Speedy Moving truck, immense, taking up the entire front of the house. The neighbors, Mrs. Higgins and Mr. Jenkins, would surely peek out curiously. Marcus and Chloe lived in the guest house, a structure we built in the backyard when they got married so they would have privacy. I heard the door on their side open. Surely the noise had woken them up. I went down the stairs with the leather folder under my arm. I opened the front door just as Mike and his boys were getting out of the truck. Good morning, Mrs. Garrick, greeted Mike, taking off his cap. Good morning, Mike. Come in. We have no time to lose. At that moment I saw Marcus running from the backyard with his pajamas on and a face full of terror. Chloe came behind him in a poorly buttoned silk robe. Mama, what is this? What is this truck doing here? Shouted Marcus, rubbing his eyes, understanding nothing. I stood on the porch, a step above them, dominating the scene like I did so many times on the loading dock. You were looking for the deed, right? I said with a powerful voice so the movers could also hear. You were looking to inherit. Well, today the succession process begins, son, but not how you thought. They stood paralyzed, watching as Mike's men entered with dollies and corrugated cardboard boxes. But are you leaving? Are you moving? Asked Chloe with a sudden glint of hope in her eyes. She thought she had one. She thought I was going to a nursing home and leaving the field free for them. I looked at her with pity. Poor delusional thing. She didn't know that in chess sometimes you move the queen not to flee, but to set up checkmate. No, darling, I responded, opening the folder and showing them for just a second the official seal. The truck isn't to take me away. The truck is because today the house gets emptied. And when I say emptied, I mean everything. Everything? Asked Marcus, trembling. Everything that is mine, I sentenced. And it just so happens, Marcus, that in this house I paid for even the air you breathe. I gave the signal to Mike to start. The first piece of furniture they took out was Marcus's favorite recliner. The one where he sat to watch football on Sundays while I cooked. That's my chair, he claimed. Error, I corrected, consulting an old mental invoice. I bought that chair in '98 with the Christmas bonus from the hardware store. It is a company asset. Load it up. This was just beginning. The old woman with the deed was about to teach them how a liquidation inventory is done. Watching Mike and his boys carry out the mahogany dining set was like watching a theater stage being dismantled after the last show. That dining set, with its 12 chairs upholstered in imported fabric, had witnessed Christmases, birthdays, and the weekly hypocrisy of Sundays. Marcus ran from one side to the other, getting in the way with his hands on his head, while Chloe tried to block the path of a mover carrying a floor lamp. Careful, you animal. That lamp is cut crystal. She shrieked with that sharp voice that drilled into my eardrums. It is crystal. Yes, I corrected, standing in the center of the living room with my list in hand. But it isn't yours, Mike. That lamp goes in box number 4 with a sale immediate label. Mama, for God's sake. Marcus planted himself in front of me with red eyes. What are you doing? Where are you taking things? You can't leave us in an empty house. I looked at him over my reading glasses. The morning was cool, but I felt an internal heat. A boiler working at maximum power. Empty house? I asked with feigned calm. No, son. The structure stays. The walls, the roof, the floor, that is a house. The stuff inside is just things. And as you well said yesterday, when she dies, this is ours. Well, I decided I don't want you to carry the burden of administering my assets when I am gone. Better I administer them now while I am alive and kicking. I turned around and walked toward my office, the only room I had ordered to leave for last. I needed to review papers. Not the deed they were looking for with such desperation, but other documents. Papers I had kept at the bottom of the gray metal filing cabinet behind the invoices from concrete and rebar suppliers from 1995. I closed the office door, muffling Chloe's screams as she now threatened to call the police. Poor fool. Call the police to report that the owner of the house is moving her own furniture. Let her call. They would serve as witnesses. I sat in my swivel chair, the one that squeaks a little when leaning back, and sighed. The smell of old paper and ink has always calmed me. It is the smell of order, of clear accounts. I opened the bottom drawer, the one with the key taped to the underside of the desk. A trick I learned from my father. I took out a thick manila folder. There it was. Project Backyard Annex. My fingers, rough from years of touching wood and metal, turned the pages of the blueprints. When Marcus married Chloe 10 years ago, they came with the story that they didn't have money for their own apartment. I, with a mother's heart softened, and the memory of my husband asking me to take care of the boy, offered to build something temporary in the backyard. While we save. They said the temporary became a decade and the construction I paid for dollar by dollar was done to their taste. But here in these papers they never bothered to read because bureaucracy makes them lazy was my safeguard. My husband always said, Eleanor, in business and in construction always read the fine print. And I, being a good student, not only read it, I drafted it. I reviewed the municipal building permit. Clearly, in the description of the work, it does not say independent residential house. It says extension of domestic unit, service and storage area. Legally, the 2-story house where my favorite leeches lived was not a separate property. It was before the law and the zoning board my luxury storage shed. An extension of my kitchen. A bitter smile appeared on my face. They thought they had possession rights. They thought if I kicked them out, they could sue me for stripping them of their family home. But if the zoning board says they live in a service shed inside my property, the rules change. I also took out the personal accounting book, a black hardcover notebook where I write down family loans. I started adding up. Marcus car, 2018 model, down payment and 12 monthly payments paid by Garrick Hardware as a non-existent productivity bonus. Chloe's trip to Miami for stress, $3,000. Tuition for the diploma courses. Marcus never finished, $5,000. Remodeling the bathroom in the guest house because Chloe didn't like the blue tile, $2,500. The sum rose to numbers that gave me vertigo, not because of the amount. Thanks to God and hard work, money was not lacking, but because of what it represented. Every dollar was an ounce of my vital energy given to two people who were waiting for my death, like someone waiting for a boring movie to end so they can go to dinner. I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. For years I had told myself that this was a mother's love. Giving without expecting, supporting. But there is a very fine line between supporting and maintaining parasites, and I had erased it with my own checkbook. They had underestimated me. That was their big mistake. They saw me as the little old lady who makes Sunday roast and knit sweaters, forgetting that I am the woman who negotiated with the Teamsters in the 80s when being a black woman and a boss was almost an insult. I heard a knock on the door. Mrs. Garrick, it was Mike's voice. We already emptied the living room and dining room. Do we continue with the upstairs bedrooms or do you want us to take the stuff from the kitchen? I opened the door. Mike was there sweating with his back brace well positioned. Behind him, Marcus was sitting on the floor in the empty space where the Persian rug used to be with his head in his hands. Chloe was talking on the phone, surely with her mother, waving her hands in the air. Continue with the kitchen, Mike, I ordered. I want you to take everything, the fine china, the appliances, even the silverware. Leave just one plate, one glass, and one spoon for me. And the coffee maker. That stays. Are you crazy? Screamed Chloe, hanging up the phone. This is psychological violence. My lawyer says you can't leave us without minimum living conditions. I walked toward her. My steps echoed in the empty room. The sound of my low heels against the bare wood was authoritarian. Marshall, minimum conditions? I asked, stopping 3 feet from her. Darling, you live in the guest house. That building has its own kitchen, right? The one I equipped with an industrial stove last year because you wanted to learn to be a chef and quit after a week. You have your own bathroom. You have your own furniture, which, by the way, I also paid for. I am emptying my house, the main house where I live. How does it affect you if I want to live in a minimalist space? Chloe opened her mouth and closed it like a fish out of water. But the kitchen over there is small, and here is where we always eat. You cook, she stammered. There is the detail, I said, raising a finger. I cook, I serve, I pay for the ingredients. The free restaurant is over, Chloe. Starting today, Mrs. Garrick's kitchen is closed for permanent inventory. If you want to eat, use your stove. If you want electricity, pay your bill because tomorrow I am going to request the power company separate the meters. The subsidy is over. Marcus lifted his head. He looked like a scolded child, not a 40-year-old man. Mama, why are you doing this to us? It was just a comment. We were worried about the papers in case something happened to you. Worried? I let out a dry laugh. Marcus, don't insult me. I heard the greed in your voices. I heard how you divided the loot. The old lady must have them here. That is what you said. Not my mother. The old lady. Well, this old lady is tired of being the family ATM. I headed to the window facing the street. Several neighbors were watching. Mrs. Higgins from number 42 was sweeping the sidewalk for the 3rd time this morning, craning her neck like a giraffe. Mr. Jenkins was walking his dog very slowly in front of the truck. Surely the gossip was already running through the neighborhood group chat. Ella has gone crazy. She's being foreclosed on. Poor woman. Let them think what they want. External perception has always been my best camouflage. When I went to material auctions, men laughed at the lady with the tools. They thought I didn't know about prices, that I would be scared by big numbers. And while they laughed, I bought the best lots at half price because I had studied the market while they drank whiskey. Now the same thing was happening. My neighbors saw an elderly woman dismantling her home, perhaps due to senile dementia. Marcus and Chloe saw a mother throwing a tantrum. No one, absolutely no one, saw the strategist who was rearranging the board to deliver the final blow. I returned to my office and picked up the phone. I dialed attorney Sterling's number. It was Sunday, I knew, but Sterling owed me his career. I was his first big client when no one would give a dime for him. Hello, he answered with a sleepy voice. Sterling, it's Eleanor. I need to see you today. Mrs. Garrick, it's Sunday. Is something serious happening? Depends for whom. For me it is a rebirth. For others it will be the apocalypse. I need to draft a new will, and I need you to bring the papers to incorporate a foundation. A foundation? His voice cleared up instantly. For what? For charity. to help elderly women entrepreneurs. I want all my assets, including the house, the commercial lots, and the hardware store, to become property of the foundation at the moment of my death, and I want to name myself sole and lifetime administrator with a salary that consumes the current profits. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard Sterling's soft laugh. I understand. And the forced heirs. I will leave them what the law marks as the indispensable minimum, if I cannot disinherit them for ingratitude. That is what we are going to study today. I expect you at 5. Bring coffee because I don't even have cups here anymore. I hung up. Outside, the noise of packing tape sealing boxes was music to my ears. I left the office with the guest house blueprints under my arm. I felt light, as if I had taken off a lead coat I had been carrying for decades. I went toward where Marcus was now arguing with Chloe in a low voice. Upon seeing me, they fell silent. I have a question, I told them, showing them the blueprints. Do you know under what legal figure your apartment is built? Chloe looked at me with distrust. It is our house, Eleanor. You gave it to us verbally, I clarified. But on paper, and paper is what rules in this world, you live in storage unit B of the property, and I was reviewing the municipal statutes. It is prohibited to permanently inhabit a storage zone that does not have an independent certificate of occupancy. The color drained from both their faces at the same time. It was a synchronized, marvelous effect. What? What do you mean, stammered Marcus. I mean that if a municipal inspector arrived, let's say tomorrow, and saw that there are people living in the shed, they could condemn that part of the property and fine me. And since I am a responsible citizen, I cannot allow irregularities in my house. You are going to kick us out, whispered Marcus, finally understanding the magnitude of the earthquake. No, son. I am not kicking you out. The law is the law, but don't worry about that today. Today, worry about helping Mike because that bed where you sleep. I paused dramatically, enjoying the moment. That king-size orthopedic bed you bought with my credit card 2 years ago. Technically, it is also part of the main house's furniture, which was lent to the storage unit. And Mike has orders to take everything that is a fixed asset. Not the bed, shrieked Chloe. That is personal. The invoice is in the name of Garrett Construction LLC. I responded coldly. It is a company asset. Mike, when you finish with the kitchen, move to the guest house. Everything that has a hardware store inventory label or an invoice in my name goes onto the truck. I turned around and went out to the porch. The fresh air hit my face. The truck was already half full. My neighbors kept watching. I raised my hand and waved at Mrs. Higgins with a radiant smile, the smile of a woman who has just reclaimed her life. I sat on the only stone step left free of boxes. I took a small notebook from my pocket where I had noted the destination of things. Living and dining room furniture, donation to the St. Jude Senior Home, where Chloe once suggested I would be better off. Appliances, garage sale to raise initial funds for the foundation, bedding and linens, migrant shelter. I was going to empty my past life to fill the future one. I was going to convert my assets into a legacy that no one could steal from me. Not even after death. I looked inside. Marcus was trying to carry a box for the first time in his life, sweating bullets. Chloe was crying sitting on the floor. I didn't feel pity. I felt the absolute clarity of someone clearing a field full of weeds to build something new. But there was something else. Something I remembered suddenly. In the bank's safe deposit box, the one Chloe said I didn't use, there was something more than jewelry. There was a document my husband signed before dying, a kind of cross-life insurance policy that Marcus didn't know about. If I demonstrated bad faith or abandonment by the beneficiaries, the insurance was cancelled. I took out my cell phone. I searched on Google apartment rental cost low-income area. If they thought today was a bad day, wait until they saw what I had prepared for the week. Because emptying the house was just the opening move. The real game, the power game where I held all the pieces, was just beginning. Mike, I shouted from the door. Be careful with that box. The memories go in there. And those are the only ones not for sale, but they weigh more than lead. Marcus looked at me with hate. For the first time I saw in his eyes not the boy I raised, but the stranger I had fed, and that curiously finished breaking the last bond of guilt that tied me. It was no longer my son standing there. It was my commercial antagonist, and in business Eleanor Garrick never loses. I adjusted my jacket, took a deep breath, and prepared to receive Attorney Sterling. The old woman with the deed was dead. Long live the president of the foundation. Monday morning arrived with a different acoustic. Without carpets to dampen footsteps and without curtains to absorb the echo, my house had become a perfect resonance box. I woke up on the military cot I had kept from when my husband used to go hunting, the only piece of furniture I allowed myself to leave in the master bedroom. My back hurt, yes, but my mind was clearer than spring water. While I boiled water on an electric hot plate on a plastic folding table, my new dining room, I reviewed the list of budget cuts. In the hardware store, when the numbers don't add up, you cut the fat. And on this property, the fat was the luxuries that kept my unwanted tenants comfortable. I took my cell phone and dialed the first number on the list, the telecom company. "Good morning," I said with my business voice. "This is Eleanor. Account holder 59490. I want to cancel the premium total package." "Yes, everything. The movie channels, the sports, and above all, the high-speed fiber optic internet." The operator tried to dissuade me by offering discounts. "Miss, you didn't understand me. I don't want a discount. I want you to leave the basic landline service for security. Nothing else. You can come pick up the modem whenever you like. Charge the penalty to the account." "No problem." I hung up and felt a perverse satisfaction. Marcus worked or pretended to work from home doing consulting I never saw him get paid for. And Chloe lived connected to her social networks, showing off a high society life that I financed. Cutting their Wi-Fi was like cutting off their oxygen. At 9 in the morning, the kitchen door, which now echoed like the entrance of an empty cathedral when opened, led in a disheveled Marcus with his shirt buttoned wrong. He had his laptop in his hand and a face of panic. "Mama, what's wrong with the modem?" The signal went out in the middle of an important video call. I restarted the device in the guest house and nothing. I poured myself instant coffee in my only enamel mug. I looked at him without blinking. "Nothing is wrong with the modem, Marcus. It simply doesn't exist anymore." "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" He blinked confused as if I were speaking Chinese. "I canceled the service," I explained with the calm of someone explaining that the toilet paper ran out. "It is part of the asset restructuring. This house is no longer a family residence. It is an administrative headquarters in liquidation. And headquarters in liquidation do not need 500 megabyte internet to watch Netflix series. But I work with that." He shouted and his voice bounced off the bare walls. "Chloe is hysterical. She can't upload her Instagram stories." "Well, let her use her mobile data," I responded, blowing the steam off my coffee. "Oh wait. The plan for your cell phones was also paid for by the company, right? I think you'll have to go to the 7-Eleven to add credit, son, because that corporate account is canceled at noon." Marcus let himself fall against the wall, sliding down until he was squatting. The cold tile floor must have been uncomfortable, but the shock was greater. "Mama, this is abuse. You are suffocating us." "No, Marcus, I am teaching you basic accounting, income versus expenses. You are pure expense." At that moment, the doorbell rang stridently. I got up, smoothed my skirt, and went to open it. It was Mr. Henderson, my trusted contractor for 20 years. A short, robust black man with hands that seemed made of sandpaper and cement, accompanied by 2 helpers carrying heavy toolboxes and rolls of industrial cable. "Good morning, boss," greeted Henderson, taking off his cap full of gypsum dust. "We're here for the shed adjustment. Keep your eyes peeled and sharpen your ears, boys," I told them, letting them in. "Let's go to the backyard." Marcus jumped up and followed us, still hugging the laptop to his chest like a useless shield. "What adjustment? What are you going to do in my house?" he asked, trotting behind us. We went out to the garden. The morning sun illuminated the construction at the back. That 2-story cottage with luxury finishes they called home, and my blueprints called storage area B. Chloe came out onto the balcony in a robe with wet hair and a towel on her head. "Marcus, there's no hot water. The heater won't turn on," she screamed without seeing the workers below. "Just in time," I murmured. I looked at Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, proceed with the assessment." Henderson took out a folder and started pointing at external pipes. "Look, Mrs. Garrick, according to the Civil Protection Regulation for storage areas of ferrous materials and solvents," said Henderson, winking at me almost imperceptibly, "it is prohibited to have domestic gas lines connected to the main structure without a certified firewall. That gas installation feeding the boiler in the annex is irregular for a shed. And what do you suggest, Mr. Henderson? I asked, crossing my arms. We have to condemn it, boss, for safety. If an inspection comes and they see gas in a loading area, they'll slap you with a fine that even selling the hardware store won't pay. Don't you even think about it, shrieked Chloe from the balcony, finally understanding what we were talking about. I need to shower with hot water. Proceed, Mr. Henderson, I ordered, ignoring my daughter-in-law's screams. Cut the gas supply and remove the pipe connecting to the main stationary tank. Henderson's helpers didn't wait for a second order. They took out wrenches and shears. The sound of metal against metal was sharp. Definitive. Marcus grabbed my arm. His grip was strong. Desperate. Mama, stop this. Chloe has sensitive skin. She can't shower with cold water. This isn't a lesson anymore. It's cruelty. I pulled loose from his grip with a sharp movement I learned in self-defense classes for seniors. Cruelty? I looked him straight in the eyes. Those brown eyes that used to inspire tenderness, and now only produce disappointment in me. Cruelty is listening to your son and his wife plan your death while you wash your hands in the bathroom. Cruelty is knowing they see me as a nuisance with an expiration date. This, Marcus, isn't cruelty. It is infrastructure regulation. If you want gas, contract your own tank, process your permits, and pay for your installation. We don't have money for that right now, he confessed with a broken voice. You know we are short. Then I suggest you look for employment. I heard that the competitor's hardware store is looking for loaders. You have a good back, Marcus. Maybe the gym I also paid for will serve for something. Henderson and his men worked fast. In less than 20 minutes, the copper pipe carrying gas to the guest house was dismantled and stacked on the grass. Chloe had come down half-dressed, crying with rage, sitting on one of the lawn chairs we hadn't sold yet. I'm going to sue you, Eleanor, she said with her mascara running. This is harassment. I have rights. Walked toward her. I felt giant. The fragility of my 71 years had evaporated, replaced by the hardness of wrought iron. Let's talk about rights, Chloe, I said, taking a folded sheet of paper out of my jacket. It was a simple copy of the land use regulations. You occupy a space that is classified as commercial industrial. Until now, I have turned a blind eye, but starting this moment, we are going to operate under the law. I unfolded the paper and put it on her lap. 0.1 hours of operation. Warehouses in this zone are prohibited from making noise after 6 o'clock in the afternoon and before 8 o'clock in the morning. That includes music, loud television, and parties. 0.2 Restricted access. As owner and administrator, I reserve the right of admission to the main property. To get to your shed, you will have to use the side service alley. The main entrance of the house is for the exclusive use of management. That is me. Chloe read the paper trembling. The alley? She whispered. That passage full of trash cans and mud. That's where they take out the rubble. Exactly, I said. It is the service entrance. And given that you do not pay rent, nor maintenance, nor electricity, nor water, I consider your status to be precarious occupants. If you don't like the alley, the doors are open for you to leave whenever you want. In fact, Mike left me some extra boxes in case you decide to leave today. Marcus approached Chloe and put a hand on her shoulder. She shook him off violently. Do something, Marcus. Your mother has gone crazy. She is treating us like dogs. No, Chloe, I intervened with an icy voice. I treated my dogs better. I gave them loyalty because they gave me loyalty. You gave me betrayal, and I am giving you reality. I turned toward Henderson, who was observing the scene with the discretion of someone who has seen many family disputes on construction sites. Mr. Henderson, there is another detail. The electrical installation of the annex is bridged from my meter. That is dangerous. I need you to install a current limiter. How many amps, boss? Enough to power 3 light bulbs and charge a cell phone. If they connect a hairdryer, a microwave, or a big television, I want the breaker to trip. Understood. About 10 amps. I'll do it right now. No, screamed Chloe, standing up. My dryer is professional. It needs power. Then dry it in the sun, darling, I responded with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It is renewable energy. I went back inside the main house, leaving behind the chaos I had orchestrated. The sound of Henderson's drill perforating the exterior wall of the guest house to change the wiring was celestial music. I sat in my folding chair and looked around. The house was empty, yes, but for the first time in years I felt it belonged to me completely. However, I knew this would not be enough. Marcus and Chloe were resistant parasites. They would endure the cold water and the lack of internet for a few days, hoping my tantrum would pass. They needed a blow they could not ignore, something that took away the hope of the future, not just the comfort of the present. My cell phone vibrated on the plastic table. It was Attorney Sterling. Mrs. Garrick, I have the draft of the Constitution of the Foundation, and I have news about the life user clause you wanted to consult. Tell me, Sterling, it is possible. We can donate the property to the Foundation today, reserving the use of for yourself. But there is an interesting detail. Upon changing the legal owner from Ella Laner Garrick to the Ella Laner Garrick Foundation, all verbal agreements or land use permissions you have given are automatically annulled. The new owners, that is the foundation, would have to sign new contracts. I smiled. It was the missing piece. That means that legally they would be invading private property of a nonprofit organization. Technically, yes. And evicting squatters from a charitable foundation is much faster before a judge than evicting a family member. Public opinion weighs a lot. Perfect. Prepare the papers, Sterling. I want to sign, and I want you to bring a senior partner here. Someone to bear witness that the property is being occupied illegally. Tomorrow at 10, Mrs. Garrick. I hung up. Outside, the screams had ceased, replaced by a tense silence. I approached the window overlooking the garden, hiding behind the frame so they wouldn't see me. Marcus was sitting on the grass with his head between his knees. Chloe was walking from one side to the other, talking on the phone, surely looking for some lawyer who would charge her cheaply. Something she wasn't going to find. They looked small. They looked defeated, but I knew that greed is a potent engine. As soon as the scare passed, they would try to counterattack. Chloe wouldn't let go of the prey so easily. She already saw herself as the owner of all this. I needed one last move for today, something symbolic. I went to the laundry room where I had piled some things Mike didn't take. I searched among the old tools and found what I was looking for. A high-security industrial padlock and a thick chain, one of those we used to lock the hardware store gates in dangerous areas. I went out to the garden again. They looked at me with suspicion, like wounded animals that don't know if the hunter is going to shoot again. I said nothing to them. I walked with a firm step toward the side gate, the one that communicated the garden with the street, the only dignified entrance left to them, apart from the main house, which I had already forbidden them to use. I closed the metal gate, passed the chain through the bars, and put on the padlock. It made a loud, heavy clack. "What are you doing?" asked Marcus, standing up. "That is the access for the car." "How am I going to bring the car in?" I put the key in my jacket pocket. "The car stays on the street, Marcus. The patio is a maneuvering zone for the foundation, and I don't want private vehicles getting in the way. Besides, according to my accounts, the insurance on that car expired yesterday, and I don't plan to renew it. If it gets stolen on the street, it is your problem." "Mama, it's an unsafe neighborhood." "I know. I have lived here 40 years. That fits why I put up bars. Pity you never valued the security I provided you. Now you get to live like normal people live, carefully." I turned around. And one more thing, I added without looking at them. "Henderson is going to put a chain-link fence separating the garden from the annex. I don't want you crossing to my side of the lot. If you need something, ring the service bell. If I am in a good mood and if it is office hours, maybe I will open." I entered and closed the sliding glass door. I locked it. Then I lowered the metal security shutter I installed years ago, and never used because Chloe thought it was ugly. The darkness flooded the empty living room. But for me it was light. I heard Chloe banging on the glass from outside, muffled by the shutter. "This isn't going to stay like this, you old witch. I have lawyers. I have rights." I poured myself another cup of coffee. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like glory. "Scream my life. Scream," I whispered to the solitude of my fortress. "Because tomorrow, when I sign the papers, neither your screams nor your lawyers are going to be able to get you out of the hole you got yourself into." I sat down to wait for the night. Tomorrow would be the day of total revelation. Tomorrow the old woman would introduce them to the owner of the foundation, and the owner has no children, only beneficiaries and noble causes. Tuesday dawned with a sound that, for my ears accustomed to machinery, was pure poetry, the dry click of an electric breaker tripping, followed immediately by a cry of frustration coming from the guest house. "Damn it again," howled Chloe. I smiled while spreading jam on my toast. I was sitting at my plastic folding table in the middle of the immensity of my empty living room. The sun streamed in without curtains to hinder it, warming my old bones. I knew exactly what had happened. Chloe, incapable of understanding the concept of limited amperage, had tried to connect her hair straightener at the same time as the electric coffee maker. The limiter that Mr. Henderson installed yesterday worked to perfection. Either you do your hair or you drink coffee, but you can't do both, darling. I got up and walked toward the back window. The view had changed radically in 24 hours. Henderson and his boys had worked forced marches to erect a chain-link fence that split the garden in two. On one side, my manicured garden, my rose bushes, and my freedom. On the other, storage area B, now converted into a concrete corral where my son and daughter-in-law paced like caged lions. I saw Marcus go out to the patio with a wrinkled shirt. Of course, without a steam iron and without someone to iron for him, the image of the successful executive crumbled quickly. He tried to flip the breaker on the external switch, but the box had a padlock that only I could open. "Mama!" he shouted at me upon seeing me through the glass. "Please, I have a Zoom meeting on my cell phone and I have 10% battery left. I need power." I opened the sliding door just a few inches. The fresh morning air slipped inside. "Good morning, Marcus." In industrial warehouses, when the breaker trips due to overload, a reconnection fine is charged. It is company policy to educate the user on responsible consumption. "Mama, stop playing games." Marcus approached the fence, clinging to the wires with fingers white from squeezing so hard. "Chloe is crying. She can't get ready." "Tell Chloe that natural beauty is in fashion," I responded, checking my wristwatch. "And about the reconnection, the technician, that is me, is on her breakfast break. Open a support ticket and I will attend to you when I finish my chamomile tea." I closed the door and returned to my breakfast. It was not sadism, although I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it a little. It was training. For 40 years they lived in a 5-star hotel where the manager, their mother, resolved everything before the problem arose. Now they were in a survival camp. If they wanted to inherit my empire, first they had to learn what it cost to keep a single light bulb lit. At 10 o'clock sharp, the street doorbell rang with that authority that only legal matters have. I smoothed my navy blue suit jacket, the color of seriousness, and went to open it. Attorney Sterling came, accompanied by a tall, bald man with thick glasses carrying a worn leather briefcase. Behind them came a young assistant with a voluminous folder. "Good morning, Mrs. Garrick," greeted Sterling, shaking my hand warmly. "I present to you Mr. Abernathy, senior partner and notary public. He comes to bear witness to the facts and to protocolize the constitution of the foundation. Come in, gentlemen. Miss, excuse the lack of furniture. We are in the process of corporate restructuring." Mr. Abernathy looked at the empty room, the marks on the floor where carpets used to be, and then looked at me. There was no pity in his gaze but respect. He understood immediately. "A blank canvas is the best place to start a new work, Mrs. Garrick," he said with a growly voice. We settled at the plastic table. The assistant took out the original deeds, those that Chloe and Marcus looked for with such desperation in my underwear drawers. She put them on the table along with the new documents Sterling had drafted in record time. "Well," said Sterling, taking out his fountain pen, "the scheme is the following. You donate the bare ownership of the entire property including the land, the main house and the annex buildings to the Ella Garrick Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. You reserve the lifetime usufruct which gives you total right of use, enjoyment and administration until the last day of your life." "And what happens with the current occupants of the guest house?" I asked, knowing the answer but needing it to be recorded in public faith. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. "Upon changing the title of the property to a non-profit legal entity, any previous verbal permission you have given is legally revoked. Starting from the signature, those persons are invading private property of a charity institution. The foundation represented by you as president has the legal obligation to charge market rent or evict, so as not to incur patrimonial damage to the charitable cause." It was perfect. It was a legal cage from which they could not escape with emotional blackmail. I was no longer the mother kicking out her son. I was the president protecting the foundation's assets. I was about to sign when I heard violent pounding on the front door. It wasn't the doorbell. They were punches. Open up, Eleanor. We know there are people in there. It was Chloe's voice, shrill and decomposed. Sterling looked at me worried. Do you want us not to open? On the contrary, I said, uncapping my own pen. Let them in. I need witnesses and I need them to understand that the game is over. Sterling went to open the door. Marcus and Chloe entered like a whirlwind. Marcus was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, and Chloe came with enormous dark glasses, surely to cover swollen eyes, and she came accompanied by a young guy in a shiny suit and the attitude of a fighting rooster. Aha! Shouted the guy in the shiny suit, pointing at me with an accusing finger. Here we have her, Mrs. Eleanor Garrick. I am the lawyer for Mrs. Chloe and Mr. Marcus. We come to notify you that you are incurring in family violence, dispossession, and moral damage. We demand that services be restored immediately, or he fell silent abruptly upon seeing Mr. Abernathy and Attorney Sterling sitting at the table surrounded by documents with official seals. Mr. Abernathy adjusted his glasses and looked at the young lawyer with the condescension of a professor looking at a failed student. Good afternoon, young man. I am senior partner Abernathy. We are in the middle of a protocol act. Do you have an appointment or any accredited legal standing in this matter? Chloe's lawyer turned pale. He recognized the name. In this city, the senior partners of big firms are like bishops, untouchable and feared. Mr. Abernathy, I didn't know, stammered the boy, lowering his finger. Marcus, Chloe, I said without getting up from my plastic chair. Good thing you arrived. Sit down. Sorry, there are no extra chairs. Stay standing. I want you to see this. What are you doing, Mama? Asked Marcus, looking at the papers with terror. His instinct told him that something definitive was happening. Are you selling the house? No, son. Selling it would imply that the money would enter my account and eventually you could fight for it as inheritance. I am doing something much better. I took the pen and signed the first document with a firm stroke. Eleanor Garrick. The black ink shone on the white paper. Then I signed the second and the third. Each signature was a nail in the coffin of their greed. What did you sign? Asked Chloe, taking off her dark glasses. Her bloodshot eyes jumped from one paper to another. Those are the deeds. Did you find them? I always knew where they were, Chloe, I responded calmly. And now these deeds are no longer in my name. I passed the document to Sterling, who extended it to Marcus so he could read it. Read it, Marcus, out loud. Clause 1. Marcus took the paper with trembling hands. He tried to focus his sight. By means of the present instrument, Eleanor Garrick donates the totality of the property to the Eleanor Garrick Foundation, with the object of creating a training and financing center for elderly women. Marcus stopped reading. He raised his eyes and I saw in them an absolute void. Foundation? Mama, did you give away the house? I didn't give it away. I destined it to a higher purpose. A purpose that does value effort, work, and dignity. Things that in this family were lost a long time ago. Chloe let out a choked scream and snatched the paper from Marcus. This is illegal. She is senile. We are going to challenge this, she yelled at her shabby lawyer. Tell them something. Tell them she can't disinherit us like this. The young lawyer shook his head, retreating toward the door. Mrs. Chloe, it is a donation while living before a notary witness and she is in full use of her faculties. If you try to challenge this alleging dementia with Mr. Abernathy as a witness, you are going to lose. And furthermore, they are going to charge you the court costs. I had better retire. This is not what I had been told. The guy fled, literally. We heard his quick steps moving away down the sidewalk. Chloe remained alone, breathing agitatedly. She looked around, searching for something to break. But there was nothing. Only us, the papers, and the naked truth. You can't do this to us, she whispered, changing tactics from fury to pity. Marcus is your son. He is your blood. Are you going to leave him on the street? No one has spoken of the street, intervened Attorney Sterling, taking another folder from his briefcase. In fact, the president of the foundation here present has had the generosity to consider your housing situation. Sterling took out 2 sets of stapled documents and held them out. What is this? Asked Marcus. A lease agreement, I explained, crossing my hands on the table. For the use of storage unit B for temporary residential purposes. Marcus read the first page. And his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. $2,000 a month, he exclaimed. Mama, that is expensive. It's a shed. It is the market price for the square footage in this residential zone, Marcus, I said with commercial coldness. It includes land use and independent access via the service alley. Water and electricity services run on your account with your own meters that you must contract. And 2 months deposit is required in advance. We don't have that money, moaned Chloe. Marcus hasn't gotten paid and then you have a cash flow problem. I sentenced, and in business when there is no flow you liquidate. You have 72 hours to sign the contract and pay the deposit or vacate the foundation's property. The silence that followed was dense, heavy like a concrete slab. Marcus looked at me as if I were a stranger, a monster that had swallowed his mother. He didn't understand that the monster had been created by them. I was only the mirror reflecting their own uselessness. Mama, are you serious? Asked Marcus with a small child's voice. Do you really prefer to give everything to strangers than to your own son? You said that when you died, this would be ours. I got up. The plastic chair scraped the floor. I approached him until we were face to face. Even though he was taller, in that moment I felt immense. That was the problem, Marcus, that you were waiting for me to die. You lived with a stopwatch in hand, counting my wrinkles, measuring my steps, waiting for the day the old lady stopped being in the way to keep the loot. I pointed toward the bathroom where it all began. I heard you. When she dies, this is ours. That phrase broke something that cannot be fixed with an I'm sorry. You killed me while I was alive, son. For you, I was already a corpse, an administrative obstacle. Well, I have news. I am alive, more alive than ever, and the living make decisions. Chloe tried to speak, but I cut her off with a hand gesture. I don't want to hear you, Chloe. You are the architect of this disaster, but my son was the one who laid the bricks. You have 72 hours, and I suggest you use the time to look for work instead of looking for lawyers, because against the foundation you are not going to win. I turned toward Mr. Abernathy. Mr. Abernay, are we finished? That is correct, Mrs. Garrick. The papers are in order. The foundation exists legally starting this minute. Congratulations, Madam President. Mr. Abernathy and Sterling gathered their things. Marcus and Chloe remained standing there like salt statues with the lease agreement in their hands. They looked like castaways who have just watched the rescue boat sail away. Get out, I told them. I have a board meeting with my pillow. And remember, use the service door. The main entrance is only for donors and authorized personnel. Marcus looked at me one last time. There was a moment, a fleeting second, in which I thought he was going to scream, to break something, to react like a man. But no, he lowered his head, defeated by the weight of his own mediocrity. He grabbed Chloe by the arm, who was sobbing in silence, and they left the house. I closed the door behind them. I slid the deadbolt, then the second lock, and finally the security chain. I stayed alone in the empty living room. The noon sun illuminated the dust floating in the air. I felt tired, an ancient tiredness that reached my marrow, but I also felt an unknown lightness. I approached the table and picked up the foundation folder. There was my legacy, not in the blood of an ungrateful son, but in the ink of a purpose. My money, my effort, my years carrying bags of concrete and fighting with suppliers. All of that would serve so that other women like me wouldn't have to depend on anyone, so they wouldn't have to put up with parasitic children or useless husbands. I went to the kitchen and poured myself another coffee. I peeked through the patio window. I saw Marcus and Chloe sitting on the grass on their side of the fence, reading the contract, arguing, pointing at the house. They were no longer my family. They were my delinquent tenants. And I, Eleanor, the owner of the hardware store, knew exactly how to deal with delinquent tenants. Suddenly my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Sterling. Mrs. Garrick, I forgot to mention a detail. As president of the foundation, you have the faculty to assign scholarships if at any moment you decide to help your son. You can do it under the heading of social assistance to persons in vulnerable situations. I let out a laugh that resonated throughout the house. Vulnerability. Yes, that is what they were now. Vulnerable to real life. I sat in my plastic chair and looked at my hands. Wrinkled hands with age spots, but strong hands that had built and that now had demolished in order to build again. They wanted the deeds. Well, they had already seen them. Pity they never learned to read the fine print of life. No one owns anything until they earn it, and no one is dead until they stop fighting. I heard Chloe screaming something from the patio, probably insults to the air. I didn't care. I turned up the volume on my old radio, the one I rescued from the laundry room, and put on a Sam Cooke record. I hummed while the music filled the empty space. It's been a long time coming. The transformation was complete. The victim had disappeared. In her place, an iron matriarch had been born. Alone, yes, but absolute mistress of her destiny. And if they thought the rental contract was tough, wait until they saw the condo rules and regulations I plan to draft this afternoon, because in the Eleanor Garrick Foundation house, order is non-negotiable. And tomorrow would be the day to hang the sign on the facade. A big shiny sign that all the neighbors could see, so they would know that a defenseless little old lady doesn't live here. Power lives here. 6 months have passed since Big Mike's moving truck took away the last vestiges of my previous life. And 6 months since the bronze sign was bolted to the stone facade. The Eleanor Garrick Foundation, empowering senior women. The house that once resonated with the echo of my loneliness, and the poisonous whispers of my family, now vibrates with a different energy. There is no useless mahogany furniture or porcelain ornaments accumulating dust. Now there are functional desks, whiteboards, and most importantly, there is noise. The blessed noise of phones ringing, keyboards being hit with enthusiasm, and women discussing sales strategies. I'm standing in what used to be my living room, observing where Marcus' sofa used to be in front of the television. Now there are 3 ladies. Miss Lupe, a 65-year-old former seamstress. Miss Hattie, who was recently widowed and makes divine desserts, and Tanya, who knows about mechanics but was never allowed to practice. They are putting together the business plan for a home delivery bakery cooperative. No, Hattie. The numbers don't come out like that, Miss Lupe tells her, pointing at the spreadsheet on the laptop. The foundation lent them. If you sell the cake for $20, you barely make back the gas. Mrs. Garrick says the margin must be 30% minimum. I smile. They have learned well. My office, the old study, has the door open. From here I control everything. I am no longer the little old lady hiding in the bathroom. I am the executive director. The change was not just furniture. It was atmosphere. The house smells of fresh brewed coffee, but not the leisure coffee of Sundays, but the strong coffee of offices where real work happens. The clock marks 10 in the morning. It is the 5th of the month, the deadline. I hear the bell of the service door, the one that leads to the side alley. It is the only entrance permitted for the tenants of Unit B. I adjust my glasses, take my accounting book, the same black notebook, now much thicker, and walk toward the back entrance. Upon opening, I find Marcus. He looks different. He has lost about 10 pounds and the belly of a sedentary executive has disappeared, replaced by a more fibrous build, fruit of necessity and not the gym. He is wearing the uniform of a logistics company. He got a job as a warehouse supervisor on the night shift. His eyes have dark circles, but they also have something they didn't have before. A trace of humility forced by reality. Behind him, a few steps back, is Chloe. She no longer wears the 2-inch acrylic nails, nor the weekly salon hair. She has her hair back in a practical ponytail and wears simple clothes. She sells products by catalog and makes deliveries on foot through the neighborhood to save gas. Good morning, Mrs. Garrick, says Marcus, extending a yellow envelope to me. He no longer calls me Mama during office hours. He learned that lesson the 2nd month when he tried to use sentimentality to ask for an extension, and I charged him 10% late interest. Good morning, Marcus. I take the envelope and take out the money right there. I count the bills in front of him. $2,000 in cash. Bills of $20, $50, even some $10. You can tell it is money gathered with effort, sweated over. It is complete. The electric bill for the annex came high this month, comments Chloe from behind with a tone that is no longer a demand, but a resigned complaint. I think the meter is failing. The meter isn't failing, Chloe, I respond, closing my book. What is happening is that now you are conscious of what it costs to leave the lights on all night. I suggest you switch to energy-saving bulbs like we did here at the foundation. It is a smart investment. Marcus nods with his gaze low. Thanks for receiving the payment. Can we see the kids this weekend? I mean, if your nieces come over. I remain firm. There are no social visits during working hours here, Marcus. But on Sunday, there is an entrepreneur bazaar in the front garden. If you want to come buy something and support the ladies, you are welcome. Like any customer, Marcus swallows hard. I know it hurts him. I know he misses entering this kitchen and opening the refrigerator as if it were his. But I also see that for the first time in his life, he feels proud of having gathered the rent by his own means. He is no longer a parasite. He is a man who survives. Okay, see you Sunday, he says. They turn around and walk toward the alley. I see how Chloe takes him by the arm, not to pull him like before but seeking support. Adversity, curiously, seems to have united them more than abundance. When I gave them everything, they fought to see who spent more. Now that they have to count pennies, they function as a team so as not to sink. I did them a favor, although they will probably hate me for it until the day of my death. I closed the door and returned to the bustle of the main house. Mrs. Garrett calls Miss Socorro, a 70-year-old woman who arrived at the foundation 3 months ago, crying because her children wanted to take her house. The notary approval arrived. I approach her table. Socorro holds a legal document with trembling hands. What does it say, Socorro? Read it with gusto. It says that the property remains shielded under the figure of inalienable family patrimony in my name, and that the power of attorney I had signed to my son-in-law is revoked. Socorro raises her eyes and they are full of tears. But those tears that cleanse the soul. They can't get me out anymore. Eleanor, it is my house. Of course it is your house. I tell her, putting a hand on her shoulder. And now with that paper you have the frying pan by the handle. What are you going to do? I'm going to put my sewing workshop in the living room like you did here with the offices. And if they don't like the noise of the sewing machine, let them buy earplugs. All the women in the room applaud. It is a moment of collective victory. Every time one of us recovers her dignity, we all heal a little. I see myself in Socorro. I see the fear I had that day in the bathroom when I heard my own blood plan my end. And I see the transformation. I retire to my office to sign some checks. The hardware store profits, which previously went to Chloe's trips and Marcus' cars, now finance microloans. Money is energy, my husband used to say. He was right. For years I wasted my energy feeding a bottomless pit. Now that energy waters a garden that blooms. I sit in my swivel chair and look out the window toward the backyard. The chain-link fence is still there, firm, separating the two worlds. On the guest house side, I see clothes hanging in the sun. Chloe is washing sheets by hand. 6 months ago, she would have screamed that her nails were going to break. Today she scrubs with strength. Necessity is the best teacher of life. Sometimes at night when the office empties and the silence returns, I ask myself if I was too hard. Doubt is natural. It is the residue of my maternal instinct. But then I remember the exact words. When she dies, this is ours. They didn't say we will miss her. They didn't say we will take care of her legacy. They just wanted the things. Upon taking the things away from them, I gave them back the opportunity to be people. Marcus has stopped being the owner's son to simply be Marcus. And I honestly believe he sleeps better now that he arrives tired from working than when he slept in the king-size bed, worried about how to ask me for more money without me noticing. My cell phone rings. It is Attorney Sterling. Mrs. Garrett, good afternoon. Just to confirm that the modification to the will was registered publicly. The foundation is the universal heir and the clause for the social assistance scholarship for your son remained as we agreed only applicable in case of serious illness or total disability, and always administered by the board of directors. Never handing over direct cash. Thanks, Sterling. It is a necessary padlock. By the way, Mrs. Garrick, I ran into your son the other day downtown. Oh yes. And what did he tell you? I asked with a slight knot in my throat. He asked about you. Not about your money nor about the inheritance. He asked how your health was. He told me he saw you carrying some archive boxes the other day, and he worries you might hurt your back. I smile and this time the smile reaches my eyes. Tell him I have a back of steel, Sterling, but thanks for telling me. I hang up the phone and stay looking at the wall where a very expensive painting used to hang that no one looked at. Now there is a map of the district with colored pins marking the businesses our grantees have opened. A bakery, a salon, a mechanic shop, a daycare. That is my true wealth. I go out to the front porch at sunset. The sun dyes the facade of the house orange. The bronze sign shines with the last rays of light. A neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, passes by walking her dog. Before she looked at me with pity when Marcus shouted at me. Now she stops and greets me with military respect. Good afternoon, Mrs. Garrick. The garden looks very pretty. Thanks, Mrs. Higgins. Roses grow better when the weeds are pruned. Listen, my granddaughter wants to start a nail business but doesn't have money for the lamp. Do you think she can come talk to you? Let her come tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Let her bring pen and paper because here we don't give anything away. Here we teach how to fish. Mrs. Higgins nods and continues her way. I breathe in the fresh afternoon air deeply. I feel full. I feel useful. The old age that Marcus and Chloe saw as a waiting room for death turned out to be the most productive stage of my life. I discovered that power was not in the deeds stored in a secret drawer, but in the capacity to say no. No to abuse. No to blackmail. No to being invisible in my own house. I looked toward the guest house one last time before entering. A dim light has turned on in the window of Marcus' kitchen. They are having dinner. Probably beans and rice bought with their money. They are talking. They are living their life. And I am living mine. The toxic symbiosis broke and both organisms survived. I enter the house and close the door. I don't put the bolt on out of fear, but out of habit. I walk down the hallway, my heels resonating with authority on the wood. Tomorrow we have a personal finance course for 50 women. I have to prepare the material. I stop in front of the hallway mirror, the same one where I looked at myself that fateful day after coming out of the bathroom. The woman who returns my gaze no longer has fear. She has wrinkles, yes, and completely white hair, but she has the gaze of an eagle. You were looking for the deeds. I tell my reflection aloud with a sweet irony. And you ended up finding your mother, or at least the woman your mother always should have been. I turn off the hallway light. The foundation house rests, but it never sleeps entirely because the dreams built here are the kind that keep you awake. I didn't leave an inheritance for them to kill each other over. I left a legacy so they would learn to live. And that without a doubt was my best investment.